Let's pray. Father, we want to thank you for what we have learned thus far today. We ask that you would keep our minds at attention and keep our hearts in a receptive mode so we can receive what it is you want to say to us today. We thank you and we praise you for your word in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, we're on part 2, the hidden messages in the book of Esther. I'm going to review those names again. Esther, hidden. Her Hebrew name, Hadassah, myrtle, symbol of love and marriage. Then we have the one she married, Xerxes, that's his Persian name. Ahasuerus, his Hebrew name. And Ahasuerus, his Greek name. So I have generally referred to him as Ahasuerus, which means the Lion King. Okay, so those are the key people, the good guys. And then, of course, we have Mordecai. He's another good guy, and his name means the little man. He's humble. Who are our bad guys? We've got Haman, which means the magnificent one. That's what he thinks of himself. And who do you think he represents? And then we have his wife, who's not so great either, Zeresh. And that's a misplaced inheritance. Okay. Alrighty, let's go on with where we left off, the assassination plot. Esther 2, 18 to 23. The king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his princes and servants, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Bigthan, which means fortune, and Teresh, which means feared, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate the king. But Mordecai found out about the plot. He told it to Queen Esther. Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. When the matter was investigated and found to be so, they were both hanged on a gallows. It was then written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. So let's go over that again. We have the king's eunuchs. A eunuch is a castrated man. That was done back then to make sure that the men would not chase women because they were going to be in charge of guarding the women. So they were castrated. So these are the king's eunuchs. They decided to conspire to assassinate the king. Mordecai learned about it. Mordecai snitches, tells Esther. Okay, then it comes to the king's knowledge. They're hanged in the gallows. All right, we talked in the first section about Haman and his lineage, Esther 3:1. Sometime later, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him his chair above all the officials who were with him. Hammedatha is a descendant of Agag. He was the king of the Amalekites. They were major enemies of the Jewish people. Saul was told to kill them all. He didn't. Look what we have. We have a descendant. The descendant goes all the way to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. The Amalekites had actually fought the Israelites all the way back to the time of Moses. They were always a pain in the you-know-what for the Israelites. All right, Exodus 17, 14 to 17, we see this. Adonai said to Moses, "Write this for a memorial in the book. Rehearse it in the hearing of Joshua, for I will utterly blot out the memory of the Amalekites from under heaven." Then Moses built an altar and called the name of it Adonai Nisi. And then he said, "By the hand upon the throne of Adonai, Adonai will have war with Amalek, from wipe them all out." So King Saul was told, you better kill them. He captured the king, Agag, but he kept him alive. We read that in the last session. And then the son of Kish was Saul. And then the lineage of Kish keeps going forward all the way to Mordecai. Haman is the lineage of the Amalekites, enemy of the Jews. We have Mordecai, who's on the line of Kish. The line of Kish was supposed to destroy the Amalekites. So here we have Mordecai, who ends up destroying Haman. God gets the job done, no matter how long it takes. He's patient, we're not. Okay, let's look at Esther 3:3-6. Then the king's servants, who were at the king's gate, said to Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" Day after day, they spoke to him. What was that king's command? Do you remember? Everybody has to bow down to this guy, Haman. Who orchestrated that plan? Haman. He got it okayed by the king. He insisted that everybody bow down to him. So they say, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, Mordecai. He wouldn't listen to them. Therefore, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's resolve would prevail, for he had told them that he was a Jew. Ah, dear, the plot gets thicker. Haman finds out that Mordecai will not bow down to him, and furthermore, he's a Jew. Remember, we have an Amalekite. Doesn't like the Jews. They're coming from the lineage of the Israelites. Doesn't like them. Now he knows he's a Jew. Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down or paying him honor. Haman was filled with rage, but it was repugnant in his eyes to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him the identity of Mordecai's people. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the whole kingdom. So what he's saying here is, I'm not going to just pick on this guy. That's going to look like I'm really murdering him. Not going to do that. I'm going to say that all the Jews are bad. We've got to get rid of them all. They're dangerous to our community. Okay, Exodus 20:3-5. This is why Mordecai would not bow down. You shall have no other gods before me. Do not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness. Do not bow down to them. Do not let anyone make you serve them. Mordecai is being a son of the commandments. He's following what he knows to be true. All right, then we go to Esther 3. They've had their banquet. They've had this assassination plot. And it tells us that Haman had gained this high position with the king. The king had ordered the servants to kneel and bow down before Haman. Mordecai said he's a Jew, not bowing down, so Haman decides to retaliate. He's going to destroy all the Jews because he knows they're never going to bow down to him because they're all Jews. Esther 3:7. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, like dice. But as we said earlier, they're like pieces of pottery, broken pottery. They would throw them, see which way they landed, heads or tails, and they would try to get guidance from their gods, okay? So they're casting the pur in the presence of Haman for 12 months, from the first month to the 12th month, the month of Adar. And by the way, we are in the 12th month right now, the month of Adar. Esther 3:8-9. Haman said to Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose laws differ from those of every other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. If it pleases the king, let an edict be written to destroy them. I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry out this business to put it into the king's treasures. What do we see here? We see Haman going to the king, saying, you know what? Those people won't bow down to you. They're righteous. They won't bow down. They're not going to bow down to me. That means they're not going to obey your laws because they won't bow down to me. Therefore, they're bad. This reminds me of the story of Job, when Satan goes before God and says, hey, that guy there, Job, you know, if you didn't give him all this good stuff, he wouldn't bow down to you. He wouldn't worship you. He wouldn't honor you. Here we have the same plot going on. The bad guy comes to the good guy. Haman, the magnificent one, says to Ahasuerus, the lion king, I want that guy, and I want to destroy all of his people too. Esther 3, 10-11. The king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. Signet ring is like the signature of the king. They would put wax on the document to seal it. Then they would take the ring which had his insignia on it, and he would put the ring into the wax. That was like his personal signature on the document. Okay, so it says, the king took his signet ring from his hand, and he gave it to Haman. He said, here, you're authorized to sign my name. Alrighty, now, he's the son of Hamadatha the Agagite, enemy of the Jews, and he's just put everything into his hands. The king said to Haman, the silver and the people are yours. Do with them as you please. Okay, there you go. You've got my authority to sign my name, even if I don't know what document you're signing for me. I'm giving you authority. That's a dangerous thing. All right, we see in Esther 3, 12-13, the king's scribes were summoned in the first month, which is Nisan, on the 13th day. Everything Haman commanded was written to the king's provincial governors and to the officials who were in every province. It was written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces, stating to destroy, slay, and annihilate the Jews. From the youth to the elderly, both little children and women, on a single day. What day was that? The 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, to plunder their possessions. If I'm not mistaken, this Thursday or Friday is the 13th of Adar. Okay, the decree went out quickly. Esther 3, 14-15. A copy of the document to be issued as a decree in every province was to be publicly proclaimed for all the peoples, so that they would be ready for that day. At the king's order, the runners went out quickly, and the decree was issued in Shushan, the capital. And then the king and Haman sat down for a drink together. But the city of Shushan was thrown into confusion. You know, we see this, don't we? We see it in our day. Laws that are placed in the high echelon suddenly throw us into confusion. The little guys, okay? But the lawmakers are up there making their laws. And here it is. We're seeing it in the scriptures as well. Alrighty, Esther 4, 1-5. This is how the Jews react when they find out that there's a decree to annihilate them. When Mordecai learned all that was done, he tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth and ashes. He went out into the middle of the city, crying out in a loud and bitter voice. In each and every province where the king's edict and the law came, there was great with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many put on sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, the queen was greatly distressed. So Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to find the cause and reason for this. So he finds out that the queen is pretty upset, and he summons the eunuch, or Esther summons the eunuch, wants to vent about this, wants to solve the problem. Why? Because she's a Jew and nobody knows it. She has a Persian name. She hasn't identified as a Jew. If they're going to kill all the Jews, she's going to be one of them. So here's the message that she sends to Mordecai. Esther 4, 10 to 11. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him instructions for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces fully understand that for anyone, man or woman, who approaches the king in the inner courtyard without being summoned, he has one law, that he will be put to death unless the king extends his golden scepter, permitting him to live. So Esther would like to go and talk to the king because Mordecai pleaded with her to go and talk to the king. Change his mind, reverse the decision, don't annihilate the Jews. That was the plan, but she had this problem. The law said she couldn't go and approach the king unless he put out the scepter saying, you have permission to come and talk to me. So she can't go talk to him. It's against the law, or she dies. Esther 4, 12 to 14. So they conveyed Esther's words to Mordecai, which was, hey, I can't do this. I can't do what you're asking me. I can't go to the king and plead with him because I've got a problem. I've got this law in the way. Mordecai told them to reply to Esther with this answer. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews, but from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Who knows whether you have attained royal status for such a time as this? Mordecai is saying to Esther, God will have his way. He will. If you are not going to be the instrument of God in this situation, he'll find someone else. But you're standing right there. You're in the palace. You're right next to the king. You have access to him. What about you? Maybe you've been given this position of royal status for this purpose and this time. This is a message for all of us. We are here in a very crazy world right now. Have we been put in this place and in this time because we have a purpose in this time? That's the big message for Esther. Are we here for such a time as this? Well, Esther is pretty upset. She wants to go and talk to the king, but she's got to deal with this law. So she's going to fast. She's going to ask the country of the Jews to fast. It's Esther 4, 15 to 16. Esther sent the reply to Mordecai, go, gather together all the Jews who are in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast in the same way. Afterward, I will go in to the king, even though it is not according to the law. So if I perish, I perish. Now, remember earlier when I talked about the timeline, Nisan, the first month of the year, Nisan, in the spring, they were casting the Purim. They were casting them, trying to see what the gods were going to tell them, okay? Nisan 13 was mentioned in the book of Esther. It was mentioned. This was the day that Haman betrayed the Jews with this order. And Nisan 14 is when they start the fast of Esther, the 3 days. According to Leviticus 23, the evening of the 14th of Nisan is the commemoration of Passover, the deliverance of the Jews from the bondage of slavery and death. They are fasting the 3 days that line up with when Moses took the people into freedom. They left their slavery. They came into freedom. It took them 3 days to get to the Red Sea. And on the 3rd day, the Red Sea parted for them, and on they went into freedom. These are the same 3 days, guys. Same 3 days. What do we know about fasting? Esther says, we're going to fast. We see in Isaiah 58:6, is not this the fast I choose, to release the bonds of wickedness, to untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to tear off every yoke. Isn't that what Esther needs to do for her people? Release them from the bonds of wickedness. Let the oppressed go free. That's why she's called a fast. Not because they just had all those banquets and they're tired of eating. It has nothing to do with that, okay? She's calling a fast because the scripture, the prophets have told the Israelites, she is a Jew. She was raised in the scriptures. She knows the stuff. All right, Esther 5, 1-3. On the 3rd day of the fast, lines up with the day the Israelites got to go through the Red Sea. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal apparel, and she stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she found favor in his eyes. So the king held out to Esther the golden scepter in his hand. What does that mean? You can speak to me. Come on in. Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter, which was sort of like an honor and an acknowledgement. Thank you for letting me come in to talk to you. Then said the king to her, what is it, Queen Esther? Whatever you request, even as much as half the kingdom, it will be given to you. He hasn't even heard her request yet. He doesn't even know what she wants. But he's already telling her, I'm willing to give it to you because I love you. You're my wife. Let's go backward in time. Exodus story. So Moses is leading the people out of Egypt for 3 days, starting on Nisan 14. They reach the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, on the 3rd day. And then Yehovah parts the sea. The people were delivered from their enemies on the 3rd day, going forward from the story of Esther. In the time of Yeshua's crucifixion, he was betrayed on Nisan 13, the day Haman betrayed the Jews. It is a biblical betrayal day. Lines up. He's crucified on the 14th of Nisan. He's in the tomb 3 days. On the 3rd day, he rises from the grave. He defeats the enemy. It's in the story of Esther. One of the hidden messages. The 3rd day will be victory. Nisan 15 now, okay? This is Esther 5, 4-6. So Esther said, if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. The king replied, bring Haman quickly so we may do what Esther said. Then the king and Haman came to the banquet. In the Complete Jewish Bible and some other translations, it says the banquet of wine. There was no food. This was just alcohol. This was just drinking. Came to the banquet of wine that Esther prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "What's your request? It will be granted to you. Whatever you request, even as much as half the kingdom, it will be fulfilled." Man, she gets her husband drunk first. Gets him full of wine, and then, okay, I'm going to tell you what I want. All right, Esther 6, 1-3. That night, sleep deserted the king. Couldn't sleep. Maybe he had too much wine. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read before the king. Can you imagine opening up that book and reading all the journals of entries of things you did? That's not interesting reading. He's trying to put himself to sleep. He can't sleep. He's going to look through the annals, the records. Maybe this will put me to sleep. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had revealed that Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the door, had conspired to kill King Ahasuerus. This is the first time he realizes it. He didn't know there was an assassination plot. Or I should say, he didn't know that Mordecai didn't get rewarded. What the king asked is this: what honor of recognition has been shown to Mordecai for this? The king's servants that attended him replied, "Nothing has been done for him." Wait a minute, he saved my life and nothing has been done for him? It's not right. Okay, Esther 6, 4-6. Now Haman had just come into the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. What timing. He's coming to the king to say, hey, my wife and I have the plan. We're going to hang Mordecai because he hasn't been bound down to me. So I've got the gallows all ready. Let's just go for it. That's what he's coming in there for. Okay? When Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for a man whom the king desires to honor? Think about this. The king has just read about Mordecai. Who's he about to honor? Mordecai. Who's Haman coming in to complain about? Mordecai. God's perfect timing. Perfect timing. Haman thinks he's going to be the one who gets honored because he's so arrogant. He thinks it's him. Esther 6, 7-10. Now Haman thought to himself, whom would the king desire to honor rather than me? So Haman replied, well, for the king, the man whom the king desires to honor, let him bring a royal robe that the king has worn. I want your robe, king, and a horse on which the king has ridden. Let them clothe that man whom the king desires to honor and parade him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming, this is what is done for a man that the king desires to honor. Oh, he's licking his chops. He's so sure it's him. He's the one who's going to get it. So he tells him what I want. I want to be honored. I want your horse. I want your robe. I want you to parade me through the streets. Surprise. The king says to Haman, go, quickly, take the robe and the horse, just as you suggested, for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything that you've recommended. Oh, can you imagine how ticked off Haman must be now? Wait, this was supposed to be for me. You're going to, wait. Did you just say Mordecai? Wait, I came here to talk to you about Mordecai. He's the bad guy. He won't bow down to me. Now you're telling me I have to put him on a horseback in your robe? Of course, he's thinking, don't want to, but he has to. Esther 6, 11-13. So Haman took the robe and the horse, robed Mordecai, and paraded him through the city streets, proclaiming, "This is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor." He's not happy. Afterwards, Mordecai then returned to the king's gate. But Haman rushed to his home, grief-stricken and with his head covered. Haman recounted to his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. "Oh dear, I didn't get the honor I was supposed to get. I'm not going to get to hang Mordecai in those gallows that we built for him." This was Zeresh's idea. His wife had come up with the idea. He was going to go with it. Now it's all toast. Esther 6:13-14. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom you have begun your downfall, is of Jewish descent, you won't be able to stand against him." What? Do you realize that the people in Babylon and then in Persia and all the other places of the world understood that nobody could stand against the Jewish people? They would always win no matter what. He says, I'm not going to be able to stand against him. He's of Jewish descent. In fact, you will certainly fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs came and hurried Haman along to the banquet Esther had prepared. This is a second banquet. Esther 7:8-10. Haman had just fallen on the couch where Esther was. Too much wine. He'd been drinking wine. The king hadn't showed up yet. There they are drinking wine, and he falls on the couch next to Esther. Okay? And then the king walks in. Uh-oh. He shouted, "Is he even going to rape the queen here in the palace before my very eyes? What's he doing sitting on the couch next to my wife?" The moment these words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. One of the king's attendants said, "Look, the gallows 75 feet high that Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke only good for the king. Those gallows are standing at Haman's house." And the king said, "Well, hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. And then the king's anger subsided. A very important message here. When we plot and we plan evil against somebody, it's going to come back on us. It's just a principle. It's written into the universe. God made it that way. If we are going to plan evil against someone, it is going to come back on us. Adar 13. Okay, now this is the 12th month of the Hebrew calendar, the 13th day. Esther 9:1-2. Consequently, on the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month Adar, the king's edict and his law drew near to be carried out. Let me explain that edict. Remember the banquet when Haman declared, "I want to go against the Jews." Okay, and you remember in the story it said, I can't overturn any laws. When I put in a law, the law stands. That's just like God, right? When he makes a law, he doesn't overturn the law. The law stands forever. And so the king had made the law. You're going to go ahead and annihilate the Jews. So he makes another law to counteract it. And he says, on the 13th day of Adar, all the Jews are given permission to defend themselves. We will arm them. We will do whatever we need to do. We will give them the weaponry. They will be able to defend themselves on the 13th of Adar when this law comes into action to annihilate them. They will be equipped. Okay? I'm not going to stop the law. I can't stop the law. I can't go against my word. But this other law will take care of them. It will protect them. Okay, so that's what that was, the king's edict. On that day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them. But contrary to expectations, the Jews gained the upper hand over those that hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus in order to lay hands on those seeking their harm. No one was able to stand against them, for fear of them had fallen on all the people. The people were afraid of the Jews, but yet they still were trying to overpower them. They couldn't do it. God was in control. Esther 9, 3-4. Even all the administrators of the provinces, the officers and governors, and those doing business for the king helped the Jews, for the dread of Mordecai had fallen on them. So even the enemies started going over to the other side of the camp. You know what? If I try to hurt these Jews, I could get struck down by the God of Israel. I better just go to the other side. So they start defending them. Mordecai was prominent at the palace. Remember, he had been honored on that horse and the robe. The whole area knew Mordecai. Did they dare go against him? Mordecai was prominent. His fame spread throughout all the provinces. The man Mordecai, the little man, that's what his name means, the little man was growing ever more powerful. He who humbles himself will be exalted. Okay, Esther 9, 5-10. Okay, Haman, this bad guy, happened to have 10 sons. It says, the Jews struck down all the enemies with the sword, killing and destroying, and they did whatever they wished to those who hated them. In the citadel at Shushan, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 people, including, and these are the sons. Oh boy, let's see, can I say these words? Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, and Vaisatha. Oh, I did it. Okay, the sons of Haman, 10 of them. They're from a wicked bloodline. They're wicked sons. They're enemies of the Jews. So if Haman is going to be struck down, then the sins of the fathers are visited upon the children to the third and the fourth generation. That is written into the law in Scripture. So they are going to have this coming upon them. Their dad was killed. He was hung in the gallows. They're going after them too, the 10 sons. It says they slew them. They didn't lay their hands on the plunder, which means they killed them, but they didn't take their property. The Jews just wanted those wicked sons dead. Because what was the order to the family of Kish? You're supposed to destroy the Amalekites, every one of them. And so Mordecai, being from the line of Kish, understood that it was his scriptural duty to destroy the Amalekites. Okay? But they didn't take the plunder. Adar 13, this is that day. They had that day in the edict. On Adar 13, you're going to go ahead and try to destroy the Jews, but the Jews can defend themselves. Okay, so it says, on that day, the number of those that were killed in the citadel at Shushan was brought to the king's attention. Then the king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Shushan, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? How many more are dead? Now, what is your request? It shall be granted to you. What other petition do you have? It shall be done. He's basically saying to her, I gave you permission because of the fasting and because you came to request it. I gave you permission to overthrow this through empowering the Jewish people. Now, what else do you want from me? Okay, that's what he's saying. What else? See, when we obey the king's orders, that is our King of Kings, he says, what else can I do for you? It's an important lesson for us. When we obey the King of Kings, and he tells us something, he knows he can trust us with the next order. Alrighty, Adar 14, the next day. Esther 9, 13 to 14. If it pleases the king, Esther said, let the Jews in Shushan be allowed to carry out today's edict tomorrow. Okay, here's what she's talking about. The edict had already begun outside of the citadel, in the provinces, outside the area where they were. It had already begun. So she says, let us carry it out tomorrow also. Let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Wait, didn't we read they were already dead? They were dead. So what was this hanging about? Because we need to let the people see. This is a public display. We want the people to see the criminals. We don't want the private consequences. We want public consequences. So they take the 10 dead guys and they hang them up on the gallows. The king commanded that this be done. A decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. The Jews in Shushan gathered together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they killed 300 men in Shushan. They did not put their hands on the plunder. That's our cliffhanger for the next section. We're going to take a break now, and we'll come back.